a I have a BA in philosophy, and I also practice as psychoanalytic psychotherapy. So this paper, when I start to speak, you will hear those influences. Some of them will be a little bit more difficult, I think, but I'll try and be as clear as I can. So the reason that I chose this title is because we're under huge stress most of the time. And some of these stresses are structural, and I want to show that in this presentation. So in this session, oh, well, I have to share my screen as well. There, no, that's not sharing, is it? Zoom. Share screen.
Yes, you have it, Marlene.
Okay. All right. So the predicament of being a human being. So I have that as my focus. And there is a painting sitting just there. It's by a painter called Holbein. But as you see, there are two people in there, which, you know, are you seeing my side thing as well? That's not what I want to show like that. I wanted to
Fill the screen.
yeah, there is that better.
You have it, yep.
Okay, so you have these two people there, one king-like person and the other one is a religious person, and in between those two people you see valuable objects of science and enjoyment, right? The music and the instruments of science of that time. And then underneath here is this weird object that is actually the point of the painting. And I'll come back to that later on, because that painting actually visually shows the predicament of being a human being. So in this session then, I will attempt to circumscribe the predicaments we experience within our spiritual practice in order to live an ethical life. To live an ethical life cannot be thought outside of our social bond, and this social bond is rapidly changing, and I'm sure everybody has noticed that. So in this presentation, I will attempt to identify and locate the subjective stumbling blocks that inevitably challenge our ethical position in the world. So the key word that I want to emphasize in this presentation is predicament. What I would like to demonstrate is that being a human being is both a challenge and a privilege. The great Carl Sagan said that we are the means by which the universe explores, understands, and experiences itself. I'll say it again. Sagan said, we are, Homo sapiens, we are the means by which the universe explores, understands, and experiences itself. When I heard this statement for the first time, I was immediately reminded of the Yoga Sutras, chapter 2, verse 18. And it says, the universe exists so that the experiencer may experience it and thus become liberated. The physicist Brian Cox comments that we, being the means by which the universe explores, understands, and experiences itself, is not only something that is quite difficult to comprehend, but it also sounds unlikely. He says, a few things are cooked in the heart of stars, stuck together in a pattern, and suddenly we have something that thinks, starts writing music, etc. That unlikely event actually happened here on this planet. And so the question becomes, on how many worlds did this happen? Now, according to Cox, it certainly did not happen anywhere else in this galaxy. And that is where the value of this planet comes in. This planet, notwithstanding its physical insignificance, might be the only place where anything thinks millions of light years in every direction. So we cannot escape the consideration that this planet is the most valuable place in the local universe. According to Swami, you might think, yeah, why is she saying that? Well, according to Swami Sarvapriyananda, an awareness of our dignity as a human being is the beginning of spirituality. An awareness of our dignity as a human being is the beginning of spirituality. But still, how should we act in a world where everything is radically changing? Now, from the point of view of astrology, and I do know that a lot of people don't want to know about astrology, for the next bit you can just ignore it, but I do want to say it though. From the point of view of astrology, the changes will be radical. So we are experiencing changes, and these changes, according to astrology, will be radical. And even if you do not give track to astrology, it is worth noting that we have been living through some dramatic social changes. So I will give this astrological context now, which you can, of course, ignore. Astrologically speaking, 2024 is considered the year of social regeneration, with major changes within technology, social media, and transportation. But it is also considered the year of collective awakening. It is also considered the year of collective awakening. The best possible outcome would be that we might collectively get an opportunity to move away from judgment, anxiety, doubt, and fear, and move into expanded integrity, humility, and love. That's the best possible outcome. And from that point of view, it might be prudent to examine our predicament of being a human being. The reason that I'm mentioning the astrological major happenings is that is because my astrologer once drew my attention to the fact that it is a privilege to have access to astrological information. When we are properly informed, it is easier to handle the changes. So I will mention 3 events, and they're on the screen there now. On the 24th of January last, 2024, Pluto left Capricorn for Aquarius, where it will stay for 20 years, until 2043, 2044. So that's a long time. That's a really long time for most of us. So with Pluto's intense presence in Aquarius, we might expect a push for total transformation, however messy that might be, in order to bring about the Aquarian ideal of equity. Because Pluto has an orbit of 248 years. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was from 1778 to 1798, a long time ago. Now, during that time, we had the North American colonies and Great Britain fighting the War of Independence. And we had the French Revolution. Now, it can be argued that both events resulted from a shift in consciousness and caused a fundamental change in our geopolitical and social world. Now, on the 20th of April coming, Uranus is conjunct Jupiter in Taurus, and that will mark another new beginning. Uranus conjunct Jupiter in Taurus brings surprises and sudden opportunities. It's like a signal for a whole new direction that will shape the next 20 years. The last one was in 1941. The next one will be in 2107. So again, it's a very important event because it's in a once-in-a-lifetime event. Because nearly everyone alive today wasn't alive when it happened last time, and we definitely won't be alive when it happens again. So it's a very special time, this 20th of April 2024. So what can we expect? We can expect to feel a surge of innovative ideas, intuitive hunches, and the desire to create a new reality for ourselves. Now, throughout 2024, Saturn will be, now this is spirituality, from a spiritual point of view, the last one is really important. Saturn, throughout the whole of 2024, will continue to come closer to Neptune in Pisces, and that will help shape our spiritual aspirations. And that is another good reason to circumscribe what our predicament actually is. So, however problematically, I will now attempt to frame the predicament of being a human being in a few sentences. The first one, suffering is structural, not accidental. In other words, inevitable. Really important to know that, right? Suffering is structural, not accidental. There is suffering because we do not know who we are, not on a spiritual level, nor on the level of the mundane. We do not coincide with our biological existence. We think we do, but we do not. Because of the way nature makes us think, we are caught up in language. Language cannot grasp the whole truth. Something always escapes, which gives rise to desire. So language and desire are connected. Desire is metonymic and therefore keeps moving, keeping us in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. Imagine, perpetual dissatisfaction. We get what we want and we are disappointed because whatever we achieved did not quite do the trick. Or we don't get what we want and we are frustrated. So we're moving between disappointment and frustration all the time. So not desiring is worse because of the deadening experience of hopelessness. Now, our solutions for alleviating this suffering are paradoxical, forsaken, radically singular, and irrevocably connected to our ethical position in life. This means that we cannot actually look to anybody else to receive the answer for how we should live. That means that we can only be authorized from ourselves if we can't look to anybody else. We can only be authorized from ourselves. Okay, so that's the predicament. So the first thing that I'd like to expand on is that suffering is structural, not accidental. Can you actually see the screen? You can, can't
Yes.
you? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So all human beings seek happiness. Years ago, at a 10-day Vipassana retreat in the UK, the words "be happy" were engraved in the concrete steps to the meditation huts. Swami Sarvapriyananda from the Advaita Vedanta Monastery in New York says that this is the best blessing that we can have. So Sarvapriyananda says that be happy is the best blessing that we can have, but it's easier said than done. On a very basic level, all beings think that they should be happy. It's very basic in us to feel that things should go well. When life becomes difficult or painful, we feel that something has gone wrong, that somehow we have made some kind of a mistake. We might start to feel depressed, lonely, or inadequate, and we are on the receiving end of a whole series of unwanted feelings. However, difficulty is inevitable. It is the first noble truth. There is suffering, full stop. Pema Chodron asserts that even if we were the Buddha himself, even if we were a fully enlightened being, we would still experience death, illness, aging, and sorrow at losing what we love, of getting what we don't want, and of not getting what we do want. All of these things would still happen to us. They are the great equalizers. They happen to us regardless of our station in life, our accomplishments, or our financial status. For instance, I can get the best medical support, but I cannot buy health. I can buy a clock, but I cannot buy time. I can buy a bed, but I cannot buy sleep. I can buy food, but I cannot buy appetite. They are the great equalizers. The Buddha talked about suffering from the point of view of being hit by two arrows. These two arrows distinguish between pain and suffering. The first arrow hits when painful events occur and it hurts. This pain is unavoidable. The second arrow, which is our reaction to the event, not only adds to our pain, but is the actual cause of our misery. There is nothing wrong with seeking happiness as long as we properly investigate what being happy actually means. We need to investigate our presumptions. When we are unhappy, we can ask ourselves, why does my body experiences itself that way? The problem we think we have might not be the real problem. The problems we have are both structural and paradoxical, both universal and subjective. Conflict and struggle are inevitable. That conflict and struggle are inevitable for the human being is already acknowledged in the Bhagavad Gita. That's about the 5th century BC. The Bhagavad, not only is conflict inevitable, we cannot remain disengaged. We are driven to act. That is clearly said in the Bhagavad Gita. So conflict is inevitable and we have to engage with it. We are driven to act. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 5 says, I don't know whether, no. For not even for a moment can a man be without action. Helplessly are all driven to action by the forces born of nature. That's the Bhagavad Gita. So we have to act, we can't avoid it. Conflict is unavoidable as well. So in these conditions, the question presents itself as to what could be considered an ethical act. There is an interesting story in the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata is an Indian epic. So there is an interesting story in the Mahabharata, and I heard it told by Swami Sarvapriyananda. In the Mahabharata, there is a war to be fought. The Kauravas are the baddies because they want to steal the kingdom from the Pandavas, who are the goodies and the rightful heirs of the kingdom. Duryodhana is the primary antagonist in the Mahabharata. Duryodhana, main actor. He was the eldest of the baddies, the Kauravas, the 100 sons of the king Dhritarashtra and his queen Gandhari. So Krishna, who's also an actor in this epic, is the incarnation of God consciousness. So you have the goodies, the baddies, and then Krishna, who is the incarnation of God consciousness. And Krishna at one stage goes to talk to Duryodhana, the baddie, to ask him, why is he starting a war with the Pandavas, who are clearly the rightful heirs of the kingdom? And Duryodhana says, Lord Krishna, don't teach me what is right and wrong. I know what is right and wrong. I even know what I'm doing is wrong. I even know what is right. I'm not doing it. I know what is right. That's not my problem. My problem is I don't feel like doing it. I know what is wrong. That's not my problem. My problem is I can't stop myself from doing it. There is something within me that is forcing me in this path. What can I do? Arjuna, in the same epic, also has this problem. Arjuna asks, what is the force within us that makes us do wrong things, even if I don't want to? I understand the difference between right and wrong, and I still do the wrong thing. Why? What is forcing me? I want to know. I want to change. Please help me. So what is the difference between Arjuna and Duryodhana? Because they obviously both have come across the same problem. The difference is that Arjuna asks for help. He has a question. He says, what is forcing me? Please help. That's the major difference. So this question is also the fundamental question for any yoga practitioner, any student of philosophy, or any practitioner of the behavioral sciences or of psychoanalysis. Now, the next bit is a bit hard, right? So here I would like to make a leap to Western philosophy. where the same issue is also presented. It's a bit of a leap. I hope to make it clear. And I'm presenting two positions. I presented two positions from the Indian part, Duryodhana and Arjuna, and now I'm presenting two positions from the Western philosophy part, Kant and de Sade, right? Kant is a Western philosophy, de Sade is a Western writer and nobleman. So Kant's major point is that he says, act only according to that maxim which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law without contradiction. So Kant says, if you're thinking about how you should act, that's how you should act. Act only according to that maxim, which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law without contradiction. De Sade, on the other hand, who wrote an awful lot of sex books, says, I have the right to enjoy your body, anyone can say to me, and I will exercise this right without any limit to the capriciousness, exactions I may wish to satiate with your body. That's a quote from Lacan in his seminar 6 on ethics. So these are two positions as well, right? A very clearly ethical position. Whatever you do has to be applicable to all men. And the other one goes, I can do whatever I want. If I want to enjoy myself with your body, I'll do so to the capriciousness, exactions I may wish to situate with your body. So it's quite an opposite position. De Sade questions the morals of his time while simultaneously addressing the predicament shared by all humans, a predicament that also Kant acknowledges. It's difficult. We have a nature that pushes us towards enjoyment. And de Sade asks, what is the use of going against it? What is the use of punishing ourselves for following it? What de Sade is outlining is that there is a level of futility and hypocrisy in trying to regulate this drive for satisfaction. Now, the first bit, act only according to that maxim, that is called the categorical imperative. That's the official name for that. And what do we know about the categorical imperative? We know that it is an a priori, which means that it operates outside and without sensory experience. In other words, it is pure form. It's not filled in with specifics, right? What is important to underline is that a form does not produce content. A form operates like a formula, and it shows a relation between positions rather than how and by whom those positions are occupied. So that's the a priori, a form. And he says it's universal. But universal is not necessarily generalizable, right? Universal is not generalizable in terms of applying its content to others, right? So the form is universal, the content is not. The form applies to everyone, but it is everyone's duty to fill in this form according to one's singular position within the symbolic and imaginary dimensions of our existence. Well, that's important. So the point is that it's a form and that there is a difference between a form that is universal, but not generalizable in terms of content. It does not prescribe, so this form, this categorical imperative, does not prescribe, but rather opens up the possibility of a production which by its very nature has to be singular. since it is not prescriptive. Unlike the South, who says, well, I can do whatever I want with your body, that's it. I have a nature that pushes me towards it, so I'll do that, right? So I would like to now explain what the singular actually is, right? Because it has a direct relation to our predicament as being a human, right? So the singular is not the particular. That's another one. It's the singular is not the particular. So what is the particular, first of all, right? All men, Socrates says, right? All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. That's a syllogism introduced by Aristotle, right? He says it's a way of arguing a point, right? All men are mortal, the general. That's the general, not the universal. The general. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Socrates is mortal is the particular partaking of the universal mortality, right? So there is nothing special about Socrates. He is mortal like everybody else, right? Now, the particular not being special is not the singular. The singular is utterly, radically special. The singular is the notion that each subject, in the face of his lived experience, has to take up position in a forsaken way, because not all the info is all the time available to make an informed position, right? So we are faced with situations, we don't have all the information, and we still have to take up a position, and we have to act because we're driven to act. That's already been established by the Bhagavad Gita 5,000 years ago. No, 5th century BC. So the notion of taking up one's singular position is also emphasized in chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita again, verse 35. Is that it? No. It says, and do thy duty, even if it be humble, rather than another's, even if it be great. To die in one's duty is life. To live in another's is death. Right? So already the Bhagavad Gita here emphasizes the singular position of everyone. And do thy duty, even if it be humble, rather than another's, even if it be great. To die in one's duty is life. To live in another's is death. Now, I have presented two positions, one from the ancient Indian philosophy and one from the recent Western philosophy, dealing with the same issue, really stressing that we are dealing with a nature that is problematic for us. The difference between Duryodhana and Arjuna is not that they are not aware of the same problem. It is that Arjuna questions the conundrum, and between Kant and the Sadhu, the difference is the same. The Sadhu decides that there is no point in addressing the difficulty of inhabiting this nature, but Kant produces a possible way out of this conundrum. The important point, though, is that the way out is singularly arrived at. The important point is that the way out of the conundrum is singularly arrived at and not by definition generalizable. Okay. Next point. There is suffering because we don't know who we are. We don't know who we are, not on a spiritual level, nor on the level of the mundane. We do not coincide with our biological existence. We think we do, but we do not. So here, I will address this from two angles, right? From the angle of the Yoga Sutras, the cause of our suffering is ignorance. According to the Buddha and the Bhagavad Gita, the cause of our suffering is desire. The Bhagavad Gita again. All is clouded by desire, as fire by smoke, as a mirror by dust, as an unborn babe by its covering. So I will first address the notion of ignorance. According to the spiritual teachings, we are Sat Chitananda. That's who we are. Sat Chitananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. It is the definition of God consciousness. That Swamasi, you are that, is in Hinduism the famous expression of the relationship between the individual and the absolute. Ramana Maharshi puts it this way. The problem is that we, as sentient beings, are Chit Jada Granti. Pure consciousness knotted in matter. That's the problem of samsara. The cause of our suffering is that we have forgotten that we truly are Sat Chitananda. Right, I have a problem with my battery. I have to check why that is. Hold on. I had not plugged it in properly.
Yeah.
So, very stupid.
I thought it was mine.
No. Okay. So, all right. So is everything back to normal?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So we are Chitananda, but we identify with Chit Jada Granti, is the point. In other words, the teachings, the spiritual teachings, are making a distinction between the ego, with which one is identified, and ourself, our true nature. So that's the distinction that is made. Now, Ramana Maharshi, I don't know whether you know him, but Ramana Maharshi is a 20th century saint. He was still alive in the second part of the 20th century. And his testimony is very, very interesting, very important. He says, he was known as Venkataraman, and that was his original name. And when he was young, when he was still Venkataraman, one day, without there being an apparent cause, he was gripped by an intense fear of death. This was not an ordinary fear, but an overwhelming, consuming terror that he was about to die. And instead of running away from this fear, he decided to investigate it directly. He focused intensely on the question, what is it that dies? And this meditation led him to the core of his being. He realized that the body dies, but that something within him, a presence or consciousness, remained alive and remained untouched by death. He understood that this presence was his true I, not the physical body, not the thoughts that come and go. For him, this was a direct experiential insight into his true nature. And within the tradition, the spiritual tradition, this true nature is called Atman, or self, and sometimes Brahman, or self. Now, from that moment, from that experience, his identity as a limited individual person ceased to dominate his consciousness. He was now identified with the eternal, unchanging self. And this was the moment of his enlightenment. A sudden and complete realization of his true nature, beyond the physical body and beyond the ego. Following this, Venkatarama lost interest in his ordinary life and dedicated his life to spiritual practice. So Ramana Maharshi, as he became later, his central teaching is the method of self-inquiry. Who am I? This practice involves the continuous, rigorous investigation into the nature of the I and the I thought, focusing on the subjective feeling of I or I am. Maharshi says that all thoughts have their origin in the fundamental I thought. And by focusing on this root thought and questioning its nature, we can trace it back to its source, the self, or pure consciousness. So this method is deceptively simple, but profound. The inquiry leads to the dissolution of the ego and the realization that the true I is not the ego, but the unchanging, ever-present awareness or consciousness. Maharshi also emphasized that true knowledge is not the acquisition of anything new. It's important, not the acquisition of anything new, but the realization of what is eternally present. The ultimate truth, the self, is within each individual and can be realized through direct experience. Enlightenment is not an attainment, but a natural state of being of all who earnestly seek it. So in other words, we already are it. It's not something that you have to become. You're already it. The thing is, you don't know it. That's the thing. So that's why it says that knowledge is not the acquisition of something new. You don't have to become something. You're already it. It is the realization of what is already there. So the solution offered in the Yoga Sutras is to separate, that's a different practice, is to separate via the practice of meditation. In the Yoga Sutras, it's called Purusha. God consciousness is called Purusha. From Prakriti, the undifferentiated stuff of mind and matter, and to have a direct experience of who we truly are. So it's a slightly different, it's a different method. It's the same thing. So the point that Maharshi illustrates, though, is that we do not coincide with our biological existence. That was his major realization. We do not coincide with our biological existence. But his testimony is not the only one. So if you watch near-death experiences on YouTube or out-of-body experiences. All these people testify that our awareness can separate from the biological body and survive death. Right? So it's not just Maharshi, it's not something that is really weird and wonderful. It is regularly testified to that we do not coincide with our biological existence. And that something of us, of our being, survives death. In the Upanishads, it's very precisely described. Our being extends into 5 interlocking sheets. So there. So the 5 interlocking sheets, I've just mentioned them there. It's not that you need to particularly remember them. Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vinyamaya Kosha, and Andamaya Kosha. So they are the 5 sheets. And the only sheet that dies is the first one, the food sheet, the Annamaya Kosha. The other ones, the vital sheet, the mental sheet, the intuitive sheet, they continue to live, or they are called the Shuksma Sharira, and they continue to live and they look for another incarnation. That's according to the Upanishads. So we have forgotten that we are Sat Chit Ananda, God consciousness. We also have forgotten that the only body that dies is the Annamaya Kosha, the food body. The other bodies continue to live. They form the subtle body, the Shuksma Sarira, and they continue. And the Shuksma Sharira continues to live. Something that I want to say as well is the Anandamaya Kosha is the sheet of deep restfulness. It is the sheet that is closest to the Atman, and it is said that pleasure is percolated from that sheet of bliss. All of these sheets are pervaded by consciousness, but are not consciousness themselves. Consciousness is self-illuminous and reveals itself in the act of illuminating everything else. In every act of knowledge, the self is revealed. So this answers the question of who we are from a spiritual point of view, and we don't know that we are that. From the mundane, what does it now mean from a mundane point of view? Who are we from a mundane point of view? The body that I see in the mirror and that I refer to as myself is not all of who I am. In fact, we could say that the body that I identify with in the mirror is my first and well-used defense mechanism. Right? It's not who I am, it's my defense mechanism, the body that I see in the mirror. It is the body that I can dress up to agree with the social norms of my time, or that I can dress up to take a stance away from the social norms of my time. It is the body that I can use to keep the other at the right distance from myself. I can, to a large extent, control how the other relates to me by the way I dress, by the way I speak or behave, or refuse to dress or speak and behave. However, the ego, my sense of self, exceeds the image in the mirror. The ego can also be defined as a set of identifications. It is my ego equal set of identifications that defines, allows me a position in the world. My identity is not limited but what I see in the mirror. My identifications exceed this limit. Moreover, and this is important, most of these identifications are unconscious. In other words, I don't know who I am because I don't know what I'm identified with, right? We often do not know what we are identified with until we lose the identification. For instance, I might not know to what extent I am identified with my job until the moment that I am sacked and I have a nervous breakdown. I am, after the nervous breakdown, forced to find another identification to stabilize the disintegration of my psychic reality. Now, another important point is that the image in the mirror is not just an image, it is a talked about image. Our parents talk about that image all the time when we are growing up. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you're so messy. Oh, you're this, you're that, right? I'm happier in my life. I'm not happier in my life. So together with that image and that talked about image, we receive and see the ideals of our time, our parents, and our peers. On top of all this, it's not an extension, on top of all this, we are also forced to retroactively identify with a body that is always ahead of us, right? We are retroactively forced to identify. So within, it has already happened, in other words, retroactively forced to identify with a body that is always ahead of us. For example, we are happily enjoying our childhood, and all of a sudden, this body starts to bleed. I now have to identify with a body that is fertile. Or it stops bleeding, and I have to identify as a menopausal woman. Or just plainly remembering the shock of noticing your first gray hair. The body is capable of making me change my social status without my consent. The body is capable of making me change my social status without my consent. However, from a spiritual point of view, no matter how strongly we identify with this body, we have a body. We are not a body. We have a body. We are not a body. Consciousness inhabits a body. That's the central message in yoga, but also in many other spiritual practices. Now, desire, that was the other one. Yes, desire and the problem of language. Because the way nature makes us things, is this? Yeah. Because of the way nature makes us think, we are caught up in language. We're stuck with that. We don't know why that is. Language cannot grasp the whole truth. Something always escapes, which gives rise to desire. Desire is metonymic and therefore keeps moving, keeping us in a state of perpetual dissatisfaction. Not desiring is worse because of the deadening experience of hopelessness. Now, Patanjali, the guy who wrote the Yoga Sutras, was given three boons as medicine for humanity. The Yoga Sutras, grammar, i.e. language, and Ayurveda. Now, considering that language is a boon that was given to humanity, it is worth investigating what being a speaking being means to our predicament of suffering here on this planet. Again, another important point. What language allows is separation. Language allows the separation between the subject and the object. It allows me to experience the difference between you and me. In other words, it allows the absolute to know itself in diversity. So may I again refer to the start of my paper, right? The universe exists so that the experiencer may experience it and thus become liberated. Language allows us experience. But what language cannot do is name my being. Something always escapes. Moreover, language can't speak the truth. The truth can only be half spoken. Because as soon as I've said something, I have also not said something. So I can only grasp it in bits and not ever completely. That's why we say that the truth can only be half spoken. And at best, we are dealing with truth effects. Given the fact that we are first and foremost speaking beings, and we are spoken about, we are also spoken about before we are born, right? Also an important point. Our conception is either wanted or unwanted, a source of anxiety and refusal, or a source of bliss, which does not stop the anxiety of the prospective parents. Regardless of whether we are wanted or not wanted, it is impossible for language to name our being. No matter how many labels are put on our existence, something always escapes. Even so, it is to language we look to give us a place in the world. Our language and our laws structure our place in the world. In other words, our language has structuring effects on our being and our social bond. Acknowledging that limitation of language allows us to name our being a little bit, problematically. But it is in the gap that is produced between the names that God can show himself. Now, our solutions for alleviating this suffering are paradoxical, forsaken, radically singular, and irrevocably connected to our ethical position in life. This means that we cannot actually look to anybody else to receive the answer of how we should live. Imagine, nobody can help us in that. We have to do this job ourselves. Now, it should be quite obvious to now, hopefully, that it's never easy to answer the question of who am I? So you have to act, you don't know who you are, you don't know it spiritually nor psychologically. But in order to illustrate that predicament, how bad that is, I would like to illustrate that with I would like to illustrate the forsakenness of that position via a game that Lacan proposes. It's a very good metaphor, I think, right? So he says there are 3 prisoners. They're in a jail. And the 3 prisoners in a jail are summoned by a warden. And the warden tells them that the warden has the authority to release one of them, and that to decide which one of them he shall free, he has concocted a little game for them to play. The winner will go free. The warden has 3 white discs and 2 black ones. And he is going to pin a disc on the back of each prisoner. But while the other 2 prisoners will be able to see what the other prisoner has been pinned on, he won't be able to see or know whether he is black or white. So he'll be able to see the others, but he won't see himself. Now, the job that each prisoner has, that each prisoner must try to logically reckon, so logically deduce, and not simply guess whether he's black or white without verbally communicating with the others. As soon as he thinks he has figured it out, he has to run to the door where he should be prepared to answer as to his color and to explain how he has worked it out. Now, having explained the rules to the prisoners, the warden pins a disc on the back of each prisoner, but he pins only a white disc on all of them. The black discs are left aside, and now the prisoners have to solve the problem. Now, according to Lacan, there is a perfect solution. But Lacan wants to demonstrate a different point, right? But he says there is a perfect solution. But Lacan wants to demonstrate, and the perfect solution is that all of the prisoners deduce together that they are all white, go together through the wall, through the door, explain it, and out they go, right? That's the perfect solution. But Lacan wants to demonstrate a different point. And the different point is that there is only one chance for freedom. What is at stake, what these prisoners are faced to, doesn't allow for a quiet, logical reasoning, because all of the knowledge, if they do so until all of the knowledge has been revealed to them, it might result that the other ones are faster and jump to their freedom first. So they would be left behind. So there is an anxiety in not knowing who you are, because your freedom is at stake in this game, right? So what this game attempts to demonstrate is that the knowledge of who you are rests in the field of the other. So you need the other to tell you, or you have to see what the others are to tell you who you might be. We receive a name from the other, and then we have to not only guess what that name means, but how to inhabit that name as well. To act and to claim our position, we need to act without having sufficient knowledge at our disposal. To both claim our name and who we are, we need to take a leap of faith, because there is something at stake. Our freedom, our life is at stake. So this game makes several points. You're on your own to try and work that out. You have to make a decision. Your life is at stake. You don't have enough knowledge at your avail, and you're in competition. You're in competition and paradoxically in cooperation in order to answer the vital question of who am I? This game illustrates the forsakenness of not knowing who we are. So then the spiritual practice and its relation to hope. And this is where the beginning of my talk comes in again, right? The point that this painting makes is the same point that Vivekananda, another spiritual teacher from the Advaita Vedanta tradition, makes. And it's a story. I'm going to read the story of Vivekananda first. It's on the internet. I've taken it straight from the internet. And he talks about the mirage of the world. And it's a story told by Swami Vivekananda as it happened to himself. Once in Western India, he says, I was traveling in the desert country on the coast of the Indian Ocean. For days and days, I used to travel on foot through the desert, but it was to my surprise that I saw every day beautiful lakes with trees all around them and the shadows of the trees upside down and vibrating there. How wonderful it looks, and they call this a desert country, I said to myself. Nearly a month I traveled, seeing these wonderful lakes, trees, and plants. And one day I was very thirsty and I wanted to have a drink of water. So I started to go to one of these clear, beautiful lakes. And as I approached, it vanished. And with a flash, it came to my brain, this is a mirage about which I have read all my life. And with that also came the idea that throughout this whole month, every day, I had been seeing this mirage and did not know it. The next morning, I began my march. There was again the lake, but with it now also came the idea that this was a mirage and not a true lake. And Vivekananda says, and so it is with this universe. We are all traveling in this mirage of the world, day after day, month after month, year after year, not knowing that it is a mirage. One day it will break up, but it will come back again. The body has to remain under the power of past karma, and so the mirage will come back. This world will come back upon us as long as we are bound by karma. Men, women, animals, plants, our attachments and duties, all will come back to us, but not with the same power. Under the influence, of this new knowledge, this seeing of the mirage and understanding that it is a mirage, the strength of karma will be broken. Its poison will be lost. It becomes transformed, for along with it comes the idea that we know it now, that the sharp distinction between the reality and the mirage has been shown or has been known. So this picture does the same thing. It shows the position of power, the position of religion, the desirable objects, both at the level of knowledge and at the level of pleasure. And then you have this thing here on the bottom, right? And the idea is that when you look at the picture, you walk away, and then in a moment, you think, but what was that thing on the bottom of the picture? You turn back, the turning back is important. And as you turn back, you realize that this thing is a skull, that it means nothing, that it is death, that it is a mirage, that the mirage of investing in the objects that ordinary worldly things gives us, right? So the message is the same. In the turning back, as in Vivekananda sees the mirages, thinks they're real, and then one day he wants to go and drink it, and he realizes there's no food there, there's no water there. In the same way, this picture wants to show that the objects that the world can deliver will actually not produce real food. They're a skull. It's death, right? So that's the point of this picture. Now, I did say spiritual practice and its relation to hope. And I hope I've demonstrated that our position in the world is radically singular. Now we have to do it for ourselves. We have to work it out ourselves. But we do have guidelines, right? We're not completely forsaken. For instance, in the Yoga Sutras, we'll be given the yamas and the niyamas, and the yamas and the niyamas say, well, if you do this, life will become a lot easier. You have the Eightfold Path in Buddhism, you know, the rightful way of working. And you have also in Western, in our Western tradition, the positive psychology. So these are the yamas and the niyamas: non-violence, truth, don't steal, don't let yourself go in wild behavior, don't be greedy, clean yourself, be content, organize yourself, be self-aware, surrender to God. You know, there are hints as to how we could make this predicament a little bit easier. The Eightfold Path: right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right samadhi. You know, there are signposts on the way, right? In positive psychology, they say, well, know what you're doing, right? Be conscious about what you're doing. Accept the truth of your life. Don't feel that you're something else that you're not. Don't pretend to yourself. Accept the truth of one's life. Take responsibility. Stop blaming others. Learn to say no. And live according to your task in life, your duty, your purpose. Live for something. And integrity. In other words, don't act in ways that make you look very hypocritical. So these are the bits that positive psychology, or the helpful hints that positive psychology produces. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is that difficulty is inevitable, that there is no generalizable answer as to how we should live, that the experience of consciousness as our true self is what is important to realize for ourselves. I can't see it properly. And that there is nowhere to go. Death is impossible. Life is eternal. So we might as well live it to the fullest of our ability. Voila. That's the thing. Done.
Merci.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Marlene. A really amazing presentation, very enlightening. So can I just ask if anybody has questions?
Shall I stop sharing, Miriam?
Maybe that's it, yeah, so I can see you.
Okay.
Thank you. So maybe some of you have questions. Just to tell you, Marlene, there was 28 people here, so.
Oh, great. I'm delighted I wasn't on my own.
Are you all stunned like me? Yeah. It's great to get the references throughout, Marlene, so help us to go and explore.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, yeah.
Particularly, a lot of people here are yoga people, so they would have read all these, and it's just worthwhile going back and exploring again.
Yeah.
Can I?
Paola, hi.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Such an amazing presentation. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but you maybe put your speaker a little bit louder, maybe. I can hear you though.
It's just I have problems with sound.
Yeah, it's a bit of an echo, but it's okay.
Okay. Okay, so I'll keep it really short. So the forsakenness forsakenness.
Oh, the forsakenness, yes.
Yeah. On the one hand, I can relate to that moment of remembering something, an ethical moment where then there is a commitment to following up with actions, and that can only happen within the individual.
Mm.
But at the same time, interconnectedness is so essential in my vision of
Absolutely.
stay alive, I think, especially from an ecological point of view.
Yeah.
And that connects for me to the fact of we are not the body. This notion of I am not my body. It's dangerous to me ecologically, because if the body and nature is seen as something where you don't identify with, it is very easily objectifiable and exploited in a materialistic way. And I know this is a simplistic set of questions, but there you have them anyway.
Well, Paola, you're dead right, right? That's why I try to say it's there. Everything I said is paradoxical. The other thing is also the case, right? The paradox, we cannot get out of the paradoxical situation when we try and grasp it within language, right? So that's the difficulty of language, right? But what you're saying is true. We can't just say I am not a body, but it is very good to know that one is not limited to the body, right? So there is both aspects are valuable. You know, we have to both know that we are the body and how valuable it is. This is why I started the paper, to underline the dignity of our position on this planet. Right, that was my first point. Don't think because we're not a body that you can just ignore it. No, it's the beginning of our spirituality. It's what we need to claim first and foremost, even though we're not limited to it.
That's the paradox, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paula. Anybody else? I'm very glad I'm getting a copy because I'm going to listen to it all over again.
Okay.
There's so much there.
Well, my brother, who's here, he asked me last time when the thing was done in Flemish. He said, "What's the difference between drive and desire?" And at the time, I said, "Well, you know, I don't want to give you the whole background of a psychoanalytic understanding, but now I thought I could have actually answered that in 2 sentences." And one sentence is, the drive has to do with the body, desire has to do with language. You know, it's not as simple as that, but that would be one way of answering that original question.
If language is so limiting in so many ways, is there other communication, like music or movement, or does that help in ways as well?
Yes. Yeah. But we cannot escape it, you see. We cannot escape this thing of language, even poetry. Maybe it's closer to our experience than logical language. Yes, absolutely. That we got, you know, the whole thing of the Upanishads are a poetic expression of
Yes.
the truth of our being. You know, poetically referring one way and then another way and again another way, and coming very, very close to what science is exploring right now, you know, from a very different angle. You know, it's yeah, poetry definitely tries very hard and is capable of pointing towards something. Yeah.
I think too, what I picked up, Marlene, was the silence between the words,
Yes.
between the the sacred words, the words in the Upanishads or in the Bhagavad Gita, even, you know, the silence between the words.
Yes. It's the silence that makes the words possible. Otherwise, it would just be a rambling. You know, it is this. It is the silence is necessary for language to become language and not to just be noise. Right. And I also, you know, there is one sentence in my presentations where I said it is in the gap between the names that God can show himself.
Aha, that's where, yes.
Mm.
And where we can find our answers, I think, you know, where we as that person who I must find my answer.
Yeah.
And in silence, I'll find my answer.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Or the answer will be revealed.
Exactly. Yeah.
I saw something coming up about.
Yes, what's that? Because I can't. Who is that?
Jane.
Are they going to speak? Is Jane going to
I
speak?
don't know. I just saw something typed come up.
Yeah, I can't find that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
It's in the chat, Marlene.
In the chat. Okay.
Yeah, Jane is making a comment about language.
Okay. Where is it?
Will I read it?
Yes, please.
So Jane is saying, that is interesting. For me, what is lost in language is filled in with experience. I can be told about something, but until I experience it, the impact or import of what language tries to convey is somewhat lost.
Mm. But there is no clear distinction between experience and language, because your experience can be different when you contextualize it differently. You know, your context and your parameters will also define the experience you have. That's why changing your point of view or changing your mind on something will change your experience. So they are it's another limitation of language. Language cannot grasp the totality of that experience, but it can structure it. It can give it a boundary, and it can change the boundary when we change the language.
Anybody else?
Well, Marlene, those last few slides with regard to the Eightfold Path and the yamas and the niyamas, and it's the dilemma is always for me, I can stay here and do my personal practice and keep my, you know, self-reflection or my self-discovery as my contribution to the greater good. And it's that sort of how do we engage at a level of accountability to one another?
Well, this is it.
And how you know, if everybody is being singularly on their path, and like you have Kant and you have de Sade, you know, these different approaches, where can we invite each other to touch into that accountability? It feels like until we feel all part of something collective, the sense of accountability may never, the flame of that may never arise in us.
Well, again, the paradoxical position is what I wanted to, it's our predicament, right? I wanted to illustrate the predicament that we found ourselves in, right? The difficulty is there. That's the difficulty, right? And what identifications allow, an identification is also mediated via language, but what an identification allows is a group experience, is a collective. I belong to this tribe. I am identified with this tribe. I will do my best for this planet, for this ecological whatever, right? So it's, so as much as our identifications aren't our true self, they do operate as a collective binding agent. Because what our identifications allow are the positioning of ideals. We want a clean planet. We want to honor this planet in its uniqueness within this galaxy. You know, these ideals of positing it in that way will share shared identifications, will produce shared identifications, which are hugely useful in our living together, because we are first and foremost social beings. We are social animals. It matters to us. So we have this absolute radical singularity, and we have this absolute radical connectiveness. But it's a paradox. And it's a tension. That tension doesn't go. That's the predicament.
Well, I know with social media and everything, it's probably a lot easier for people to find their tribe and have that satisfaction of a shared vision or action. Or I think for me personally, I work on the basis that if the population of the planet is as many billion as it is, there must be other people who have a similar vision as me, even if I don't even know they exist. So I feel part of a collective that I don't actually know exists, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I know that's paradox as well, but
apart from Marlene and Douglas.
well, yeah, apart from the people I do know and love dearly for you know, a common vision, let's say. It could matter, but if I just work on the basis that out of 8 billion people, there must be some population who are on a similar path of ethics and self-responsibility and singularity, in a way that's maybe just a faith or a fact that I'm basing on to keep myself going, but I'm actually doing it very singularly in an isolated social setting, right? So it's Yeah.
And so we must never and I try to say that with the quote from the Bhagavad Gita, to never underestimate your actual contribution to this creative project that this planet is. Do you know? It's really, really important to never to underestimate, to absolutely maintain your dignity and the value of your contribution. To never, ever, ever diminish it for whatever reason. Mm.
Okay, so can I wind it up now, or has anyone else got a question while we're ruminating here? Any?
I think there's a question on the box, Miriam.
Is I can't. Can you see it? Because
Yes.
for some reason on my.
Does language protect us from the full impact of experience?
I didn't. Well, I wish I could see the chatting. I must be somewhere here, but view, no.
Does language? You say to me, does language protect?
Us
Can you?
From the full impact of experience.
Also.
Have you heard that, Marlene?
Well, yes. If what is the? It's a very good point, right? It's I don't know who said it, but it's a very good
Joanna
point.
from there.
Who?
No, it wasn't me. It was Paola.
Oh yeah. Well, the full impact of experience. What is the definition of trauma? Something that happens, but that happens outside of language. Something has happened. It has a huge impact, but it hasn't been circumscribed by language. It has no name, right? And what is the job when something gigantically traumatic happens to the organism? What helps then is to circumscribe the trauma. It can't be named, but you can start to name it somewhere here. It happened here, but you can start to name it there and circumscribe it. Try to find names, always missing the mark, but coming closer to it and easing it that way, draining it that way. Language can drain a trauma, not necessarily completely wipe it out or erase it, but it can drain the impact.
Paola, had you more to say there about the Damascus experience?
I don't want to wreck your head with my background. I was thinking of Krishna's revelation, I am, which is like a Damascus Road experience, overpowering, overwhelming, and that maybe language contains the enormousness of all experience, like all. That if we were constantly open to experience and filtered by language, we might be overwhelmed.
I hope I understood it. The sound isn't great, but yes, you're right. Language does that. It has that effect. If I understood it right, what you said, there is when I hear you, there is a doubleness to what I hear. Yeah.
I just want to say,
Tracy.
hello. Hi, Marlene. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Hello. I really appreciate Claire as well, and Marlene. Claire, what you said just in your last comments about, you know, your singularity, and I would say my singularity in the reflection and our struggle in our own discovery, singular discovery. But in your comments there, and how you reflected how, I'm getting all mixed up, but basically the importance of my own reflection is united in everyone's reflection. And I'm not really saying it, but it's really touched me in the importance of my contribution,
Yes.
knowing that it's a contribution to everyone's,
Yes.
and that unity it provides even more strength, I think,
Yes.
in my singularity,
Exactly.
because it's one link on the chain, but it's a huge. Now I'm hearing how hugely important therefore our singular contributions are, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you very much for that. Alone is huge. Marlene and Claire, thank you so much for that.
Okay. Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, is there another question in? Is there another question from someone? That might have been Tracy's.
I want to say thank you to everybody who took the time to join this. I know it's a big deal to do that. I am very grateful.
Well, it was certainly wonderful, Marlene, to have this discussion this morning. I think everyone has fully enjoyed it. And I want to thank you all as well for coming along. I just want